the associations that are engaged in civic politics that are following it. So I'm just wondering what sort of scrutiny do your local politicians get?
Well, that actually touches on one of our success stories of this year is Engage Barrie and members of, we actually started our own media group, which is now sort of branched off and become its own thing. Because we do have local media, but it's, it's like Metroland and all of those things that it's local, but controlled from further away. And a lot of our truly local media had sort of been disappearing. And some of them, I'm going to be snarky here. This is me and not representing Engage Barrie. Some of them seem to be mouthpieces for their favorite councillors instead of perhaps investigating closely and digging deeper. I'll put my Engage hat back on.
Okay, that's very interesting that you kind of started your own media group. So it's like, is it like an online newspaper, or is it just like a media group, as in you just report local news?
Well, it aims to be a few different things, but when they did launch, it was a project that started summer of 2020 throughout the pandemic. And they did launch in January of this year as a community media organization. So it's basically online. They got a grant for a video journalist. And so they've been putting stories together, sort of the long form stories, as opposed to, the daily news kind of thing. So they've, Sam Gillette has been the reporter on that. He's unfortunately leaving the end of the month, but he's done an amazing job. Just digging deeper into issues like the supervised consumption site, into, I'm blanking on all of the issues he's talked about, homelessness in the city, because we also have quite a homelessness crisis here. Sort of pressing into the issues that really kind of got more surfacey in other local media.
Okay. I believe the next person is Rahul. Rahul, did you have a question?
Yeah, hey, thanks so much, Alan. Thanks so much for sharing Engage Barrie, Team Engage Barrie. I'm fairly new to this space, so I'm really glad I discovered it. I actually had two suggestions / thoughts. I'm curious if your team has explored them for kind of actions coming up. The pandemic has in some ways made public consultations and council meetings a lot more accessible in some respects because they're available in a digital format, especially like the deputations and the submission of letters has been easier. I mean, including for myself. The caveat being those with access, to quality internet, and perhaps that certainly probably was an issue for Barrie. I'm not sure if it still is, as the rural-urban divide shifts. So I'm curious if that's something Engage Barrie, and I hope Engage Peel as well will consider advocating for. There's been talk around, let's make sure these elements of digital access remain post-pandemic, in addition to physical council meetings, physical consultations. So let's actually ensure that redundancy continues for accessibility. And then a personal passion of mine, which I want to advocate for, is I'm hoping there's going to be work done to specifically engage newcomers in civic engagement. So perhaps working with settlement agencies. My job is a cycling program with a settlement agency here in Mississauga. So it's really interesting to speak with newcomers and hear about just how little information they're provided. And they're already quite, not necessarily afraid, but they're very hesitant to put themselves out there, even if it is just to, politely agree or disagree with the policy matters. So yeah, those are my kind of two thoughts. I'm curious if those have been talked about with your team.
So I know when we first got together, there was a lot of talk about, how do you reach out to people who don't, like you say, who are hesitant or who are new to politics and get it. And I think I think if you know, your idea of a newcomer's approach is, I think it's a great idea. Like trying to get people who are especially new to the city not to feel that they could just have to live in their sheltered life and not worry about that. I don't think we have an answer yet. Like we are still, you know, I think there was a lot of energy when we could meet together. And then when the pandemic hit, it was a lot harder to maintain that energy. And I don't know if it's a good thing for you guys that you're starting off in this format and then growing from there, because I feel like a lot of the people in our group, it was a bit more of a challenge to keep the energy going over Zoom, that we were sort of missing that in-person camaraderie. So that in some ways changed the direction of the energy a bit, but at the same time, then we've had these other groups that have popped up and taken on causes, and it's getting that information out to them. So it's the communication, I think, is key, and it's hard to get. It's a challenge to get people working on the administration of the communication. Right, a lot of people want to take action, but there's planning and timing that's needed, and sometimes that takes a lot of time, and it's hard to find that balance in your work life to your work family life to then try to find time to help administer another organization.
Well, and I think like with the digital question, there's been pros and cons. I mean, our city hall, I think it was Jonathan who said that your Rogers was no longer, we at least still have our Rogers. So City Hall had been already being broadcast even before the pandemic. You could sit at home and swear at the television instead of having to go downtown to City Hall to see what was happening. So they've now got it on Zoom so that they aren't together, but the public could already see what was going on before everything changed. The one thing that I have noticed and I've heard people say is that it's a lot more tricky. Like people aren't as aware about giving deputations or about public meetings. Because it used to be that you could go and you'd have your people surrounding you and giving you a little pep talk before you said what you wanted to say to council. And now it's, the mute button and, does this camera make me, appear like a big shiny thing? Or, there has been less participation from the public that way.
That's an interesting point.
Digital.
Okay, thanks. Rahul, I hope that answered your question for now.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I want to give Sylvia the time. She's been very patient. So Sylvia, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. So Alan knows me that I have been very much following City of Brampton politics. And what I've found is almost no one knows anything about anything at the City of Brampton, whether it's residents knowing how property tax works or how the budget works, or city council understanding how the budget and property tax work. We have council currently bragging about being the most pro-transit council ever. However, they're going to do the least of any council since at least 2003. Yeah, basically, so this term of council has been much more united and yet also gotten dramatically less done. And so our local MPs, like in the winter, they will get tons of calls about snow removal because people have that little understanding of who does what that they call their MPs about snow removal. So it's basically, the City of Brampton legally exists, but there is not like a city like as an actual concept. So I don't know if you're aware of how fast Brampton is growing, but it's growing by 25,000 people a year.
Oh, wow.
And so Brampton is now over 700,000 people. once upon a time Barrie was bigger than Brampton. it's Brampton has gained more people than Barrie in the last 10 years. Effectively, the entire city is falling apart. There is no real social concept of a city, and no one knows anything. I don't even know where to start on organizing in this city. Like, some of the media won't even really address the fact that council is saying stuff that is just actually lies.
Yeah, there is that. Well, one thing, I mean, in the last year, there's been no end to weirdness that has been happening in Barrie. We've had a few things that we just feel like we're kind of been scrambling around issues. Now that, knock on wood, things are calming down in the chaos department a little bit, we're hoping to get back into a lot of that sort of education and tutorial of, like, you're yelling at city council for this, but this is actually a provincial issue, or, your councillor might not be the best person to talk to about animal control. This is the number you call, sort of thing, and doing more of an education that way. One thing that we have been consistently doing, even in the before times and during the pandemic, is breaking down council meetings into plain speak ahead of time, so that people know what the heck motion 62/4G51 is actually about and why they might care. Giving a little preview of what's coming up, if there is an issue that is one of the bigger ticket items, having a little bit more discussion about that, so that people understand what may or may not be at stake. And if this is something important to you, talk to your counselor, or this is a group that's organizing around that, doing a bit more of that. But yeah, I think, a lot of that education is good. And also, I'm putting on snarky Alyssa hat again. I think
no, it's okay. You can be as snarky as you want.
You've clearly never seen me go talking to.
I think council kind of got used to people not really paying attention, and the stuff that the city puts out, and yes, the city does announce what's coming up at council meetings, but A, it's really difficult to find it, and B, it's all in those letters and numbers and a whole lot of jargon. I think like, just that simple act of breaking stuff down into normal human language instead of the technical jargon has helped a lot of people show up when there's something that they're interested in, and start paying attention, instead of the eyes rolling into the back of your head and just zoning out completely. And I think one of our successes, our most fundamental successes, is just that a lot more people are paying attention. And just by the fact that people are paying attention, it starts to hold people more accountable. So if you've got, the counselors that you said, Sylvia, are lying through their teeth about certain things, there's actually people watching and listening to the lie, and can, perhaps a handful of them can say, wait a second, that's not actually how this works. So I think just the act of getting people paying attention is already making a huge difference. But I'm also Anna, on top of being a snarky person. So
it's all right.
I swing between both poles.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Sylvia for asking her question. Actually, I want to give a quick shout out to Sylvia, because if anyone is familiar with the nonprofit known as Strong Towns, she actually wrote a very interesting history of Brampton transit on that website, Strong Towns. And I'll just post a link on the chat, but it's actually a very good read if you have time to take a look at it. She wrote it in 2018, so I don't know if it needs an update from you, Sylvia, later on, but it's a very good read. She is a very observant watcher of Brampton City Council. So if you really want to know what's going on at Brampton City Council and exactly what they're doing there, then give Sylvia a follow. I believe she goes by @BramptonRecorder. So you mentioned there's been a lot of talk, obviously, of City Council, and I'm just wondering how you talked about maybe like groups in the community and within Engage Barrie about subcommittees. What has been the reaction of City Council so far? And let me just go on a bit here, because I followed Mayor Lehman for a couple of years now. He seems like an okay guy. He seems like in the mode of a Naheed Nenshi or Don Iverson type of forward-thinking, progressive politician. And I understand you mentioned that one of the issues that galvanized Engage Barrie to form was that a city councilor at Barrie had gotten blowback for calling out white supremacy. I believe that's Councillor Keenan Alwyn from Ward 2, and that I believe he's a former Green Party candidate. So I guess he has a sort of a progressive bent to it. So I guess those two gentlemen would probably be a little more receptive to Engage Barrie. But I'm just wondering how other councillors have reacted to you, or have you has anyone in City Council reached out directly and said, "Oh yeah, I want to work with Engage Barrie on this, or has the City Councilor kind of said Engage Barrie is like the scum of the earth? Like, I was just wondering, like, between those two polar viewpoints, like, how has City Council reacted to you, like individually and collectively? And if you want to call out names, that's fine. I don't really care. I got no skin in the game.
There are a few who hate us. Several of our members have been blocked on social media from a couple of their.
Wow.
But there are also quite a few who have been working with us and chatting with us as well. And yeah, I mean, Keenan Alwyn is definitely the counselor who's probably more the shake it up and try and be a bit more radical on City Council. But there's and there's there are a couple who are the polar opposite of that, but there's a lot of folks in the middle as well. So, and I think, again, we've really only been doing well. Our first report to council was on ranked ballots, and I think while not everyone necessarily liked what we had to say about ranked ballots, it did, we really broke onto the scene, showing that we did do our research, and that we weren't just being oppositional, that we had some background on that. There have been other issues where perhaps they're a little more controversial and they have gotten upset with us. But I think, especially recently, when we have written into council, they have started to pay attention and bring some of the questions that we have asked up at council. So there's and some of the people who have brought it up don't necessarily agree with everything we say either, but I think it has started to get people. I mean, even if you want to be cynical and say it's only because they want to show that they're listening to people, they are actually starting to pay attention to what people have to say, and it's not. Often, especially with the subgroups, it is probably along the more radical ideas that people are bringing, but they are getting considered now by a lot more of the councillors, I would say.
I think we try to be pretty respectful when we bring up ideas, especially in a written format.
Yeah.
I know even myself, when I've written to my counselor, now I have I've known my counselor for a while in a personal relationship as well, outside of just the political venue. So, that gives me a little bit of an edge when I email him. He might be more receptive to or look at my email sooner. I don't know for sure, but he's very respectful to listening to ideas that are especially researched and have validity behind them. I think we've done that with a lot of the information that we've put towards council. Is we've put the rationale behind why we feel a certain way or have certain ideas. And even from other council members, recently I sent some stuff to the council at large, and there's council members that aren't in my ward but responded to me privately and thanked me for the information that I presented, because it's something that they didn't know or they hadn't considered before. And really, that's all you can ask for, I think, is for somebody to look at ideas and consider them. Because hopefully they do that, they might read a paper that might change their mind, or at least make them think about things from another perspective. And I think the other thing we've done is we tend to, when we do those kind of write-in things, and I know Alyssa spearheads a lot of them, but there's a lot of discussion back and forth, like, oh, do you think we're being too heavy-handed here? Do you think we have enough information to support that? And we try to help each other out with finding the information to help support our position on something.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
I
and
see.
even with the ranked ballots, our report, we weren't aware that it was coming up in front of council. So we basically found out Thursday evening that it was going to be coming up in front of council Monday morning. And so a group of us basically had the weekend to put our report together. And it's always very much a group effort. Like, even, sometimes it's okay, Alyssa, you've got time, start this letter, and I'll sort of throw something on a page. But even if it's one person who started it and other people are editing it, there's always like what eventually gets sent to council is absolutely nothing like what it started as, because everyone's bringing in just so many different viewpoints and perspectives on an issue. And I think it's important to note that we don't, like, internally, we don't always agree on everything either, or agree on what the best angle is, or approach. So, we have to be just as flexible and accountable and transparent as we're asking city council to be. And we're constantly juggling, whose voice, how do we allow everyone's voice to be heard, without making it, nothing, like just sort of a meaningless thing, but making sure that everyone's perspective does get in, who wants to have their perspective involved in something.
Okay. Well, thank you. As we start to wind down a bit here, I guess my last question, and if people have other questions after this one, they'll feel free to ask. In the near future, what is Engage Barrie focusing on? Any strategies in achieving those goals, and tips on like strategies that we can adopt in HPO for anything we have in our community? And there like the openness to maybe cooperating with other local groups of a similar kind in other cities.
Well, it was great to find you guys, or to hear of you.
It's a start, right?
Well, I think one of the not pitfalls, but one of the challenges that we have hit is because we started off so very organically, and we were really taking off when everything kind of changed, and various people, you know, had to fall back because they had families that were at home, or because they're like Rob, their jobs went completely insane. So there was a shift, partly due to the pandemic, I think, of you know, we grew really fast out of this little organic soup, and dealing with everything organically in the beginning made a lot of sense. But now we've got so many people involved and so many different issues that people are interested in taking the ball and running with, that I think we've lost a little bit of the center. And we're sort of at the moment trying to really draw it back in some ways, without, you know, extinguishing all the enthusiasm of all of these subgroups. But we've sort of lost the core, and it's become, you know, it's become, you know, people running wild with the issues that they have. So we're trying to strike a balance, because in the very beginning, as we were developing our mission statement and our vision, we lost a lot of the people who really just wanted to hit the ground running and do something that they could see tangible results from. And then once we got all of that policy stuff in, it sort of became, you know, everyone running off and doing their causes. So right now we're trying to sort of give it a bit more of a structure for everyone to frame, or to hang their different things on. So we're getting back a little bit more into the policy stuff, just to have that ready, and figuring out how best to strike a balance between those two, so that it's not just swinging from policy to boots on the ground and losing track of how all of those things are connected. So if, you know, I know that you guys had come to us saying, you know, what what would be some of the advice? I think finding a balance between those two energies, because both are super important, but finding a way to balance both of those would probably be the advice I would give to you guys starting out. Have some sort of a structure in place, not too much. Don't get too bogged down in it and lose the energy of the people wanting to make change. But don't lose track of it either. And yeah, I think, sure, go ahead.
I just think also, I think, you know, I think we had when we did that all candidates meeting in the by-election, that was very successful. I think the candidates appreciated it. And I think the people that showed up appreciated it. And I think something, you know, I think that in the next election, like Alyssa mentioned before, that's another goal or objective that I think we can sort of work towards together. You know, I think there's a lot of people that sort of see that as, you know, like that's like the core of sort of starting the engagement. So if we can, I think that the 2022 elections will probably be another milestone for us to sort of aim towards.
And we also do, with the election, we do have a subgroup that is working on trying to identify and encourage more diversity on council. So getting more women to run, you know, getting more people of color, you know, we have a very white, very male council at the moment.
No, that's not surprising.
Yeah, so we have 2 women, and other than that, it's pretty much
Mhm.
pretty much white dudes. So yeah, trying to encourage more people to get involved, but also set up mentorships with people. Even if they're just curious, showing them how it could work and helping them out that way, helping them decide, or even getting more people to help on someone else's campaign, just to get involved that way. So trying to bring more voices in, other than the dudes in the suits, as I call them.
Yeah, that's a good point. And on that note, I'd just like to say thank you very much, Alyssa and Rob from Engage Barrie, for coming to our virtual town hall tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm bringing an end to the recorded portion of this town hall. We're not ending right away. If I notice some people probably want to have more questions for Alyssa and Rob after this, so feel free to stick around. And please follow us, Engage Barrie, on Twitter at oh my gosh. At Engage Peel, Twitter at Engage Peel. Also looking to start up a Facebook soon. And as we recorded this town hall, I'm looking to post it on Facebook or YouTube, some other platform. We have bi-weekly meetings within our Engage Peel, and we try to do a town hall once a month, so keep an eye out for that. Oh, I want to thank our guests again from Engage Peel for joining us at this town hall tonight. Thank you and good night.